Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Paradikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paradikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. And Samaveta Bhaktabrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 22nd day of August 2022, Holy Ekadashi Day, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Canto 5, The Creative Impetus, Chapter 25, The Glories of Lord Ananta, text number 9. Utpatti, Stiti, Laya, Hetavo, Asya, Kalpaha, Satvadyaha, Prakriti, Guna, Yadikshayasan, Yadrupam, Dhruvam, Akvatam, Yad, Ekamatman, Nanadat, Katam, Uha, Veda, Tasya Vartma. Now it's a jazzy rhythm, so listen carefully. Utpatti stiti laya hetavosya kalpa Satpadya prakriti gunaya dikshayasan Yad drupam dhuvamakvatam yadekamatman Nanadat katamu haveda tasya vartma Utpatti stita laya hetavosya kalpa Satvadya prakriti gunaya dikshayasan Yadrupam dhuvamakvatam yadekamatman Nanadat katamuha veda tasya vartma Utpatti stiti laya hetavosya kalpa Satvadya prakriti gunaya dikshayasan Yadrupam dhuvamakvatam yadekamatman Nanadat katamuha veda tasya vartma Utpatti stitalaya hetavosya kalpa Satvadya prakriti gunaya dikshayasan Yadrupam dhuvamakvatam yadekamatman Nanadat katamuha veda tasya vartma Utpatti stitilaya hetavosya kalpa Satvadya prakriti gunaya dikshayasan Yadrupam dhuvamakvatam yadekamatman Nanadat katamuha veda tasya vartma. Anyone else want to try it? Utpatti stitalaya hetavosya kalpa Satvadya prakriti gunaya dikshayasan Yadrupam dhuvamakvatam yadekamatman Nanadat katamuha veda tasya vartma. Anyone online? I didn't think they would be. Hare Krishna. Utpatti of creation. Sthiti, maintenance. Laya and dissolution. Hetavaha, the original cause. Asya, of this material world. Kalpaha, capable of acting. Sattva adyaha, headed by the sattva guna. Prakriti gunaha, the modes of material nature. Yat, of whom? Ikshaya, by the glance. Asan, became. Yat Rupam, the form of whom. Dhruvam, unlimited. Akvatam, uncreated. Yat, who. Ekam, one. Atman, in himself. Nana, variously. Adhat, has manifested. Katam, how. Uha, certainly. Veda, can understand. Tasya, his. Vartma, path. Translation. So he's still speaking about Ananta. These are the glories of Ananta. By his glance, the Supreme Personality of Godhead enables the modes of material nature to act as the causes of the universal creation, maintenance, and destruction. The Supreme Soul is unlimited and beginningless, and although he is one, he has manifested himself in many forms. How can human society understand the ways of the Supreme? Purport. From Vedic literature, we learn that when the Supreme Lord glances, sa-aikshata, over the material energy, the three modes of material nature become manifest and create material variety. Before he glances over the material energy, there is no possibility of the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the material world. The Lord existed before the creation, and consequently he is eternal and unchanging. Therefore, how can any human being, however great a scientist or philosopher he may be, understand the ways of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? The following quotations from the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Adikanda 148-52 and 158-69, tell of the glories of Lord Ananta. I'll just chant one of these Bengalis. There's a lot of Bengali verses. Ki Brahma, Ki Shiva, Ki Sanakadi Kumar, Vyasa Shukra Naradadi Bhakta Namayana. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, the four Kumaras, Sanaka, Sanatan, Sanandan, and Sanat Kumara, Vyasadeva, Shukadev, Goswami, and Narada are all pure devotees, eternal servants of the Lord. Lord Sri Ananta is worshipped by all the uncontaminated devotees mentioned above. He has thousands of hoods and is a reservoir of all devotional service. Lord Ananta is the original person and the great mystic controller. At the same time, he is a servant of God, a Vaishnava. Since there is no end to his glories, no one can understand him fully. I have already spoken to you of his service to the Lord. Now hear how the self-sufficient Anantadev exists in the lower planetary system of Patala. Bearing his stringed instrument, the Tumburu, on his shoulders, the great sage Narada Muni always glorifies Lord Ananta. Narada Muni has composed many transcendental verses in praise of the Lord. Simply due to the glance of Lord Ananta, the three material modes of nature interact and produce creation, maintenance, and annihilation. These modes of nature appear again and again. The Lord is glorified as one without a second, and as the Supreme Truth who has no beginning. Therefore he is called Anantadev, unlimited. Who can understand him? His form is completely spiritual, and he manifests it only by his mercy. All the activities of this material world are conducted only in his form. He is very powerful and always prepared to please his personal associates and devotees. If we simply try to engage in the congregational chanting of the glories of Lord Anantadev, the dirty things in our hearts accumulated during many births will immediately be washed away. Therefore, a Vaishnava never loses an opportunity to glorify Anantadev. Lord Anantadev is known as Shesha, the unlimited end, because he ends our passage through this material world. Simply by chanting his glories, everyone can be liberated. On his head, Anantadev sustains the entire universe with its millions of planets containing enormous oceans and mountains. He is so large and powerful that this universe rests on one of his hoods just like a drop of water. He does not know where it is. While bearing the universe on one of his hoods, Anantadev chants the glories of Krishna with each of his thousands of mouths. Although he has been chanting the glories of Lord Krishna since time immemorial, he has still not come to their end. To this very day, Lord Ananta continues to chant the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and still he finds no end to them. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakya Chakshur Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So I find it interesting that this Lord Ananta Dev, in various manifestations as Mahavishnu and the other Purusha avatars, is responsible for the creation. He's overseeing the creation. And then when he's down there in Patala, he's holding up all the universes on his many, many hoods. So he's also responsible for maintenance. And then when he gets angry, remember he gets a little bit angry because the living entities have not gone back to Godhead. Then he expands his manifests Rudra Devs and they all destroy. So there he is. Creation, maintenance, and destruction from Lord Ananta Dev. And this quote from the Chaitanya Bhagavatam, written by Vrindavan Thakur, he was a disciple of Lord Nityananda. And there's large sections of the Chaitanya Bhagavatam that glorify Lord Nityananda. And this is one of them, because Lord Nityananda is not different from Balaram, and Balaram expands into Sankirtan as if Chatuvyuha. So really all of the Anantadev can be said to be an expansion of Balaram, and not different from Nityananda. And here at the end here, he says, this way Lord Ananta continues to chant the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and still he finds no end to them. So one of the things that's really interesting about all these expansions, and is manifested so nicely in Balaram and also Nityananda, is that they're simply claiming to be servants. They're taking pleasure in serving Krishna. Nityananda is serving Krishna in the form of Lord Chaitanya. And Anantadev is serving Krishna directly, or as Vishnu or Narayan. But they themselves want to get the pleasure of serving the Lord. And indeed, this is the same truth for Lord Krishna himself. He comes as Lord Chaitanya to taste the pleasure of serving himself in the mood of Radharani. So in all of these manifestations, we see that Ekale Ishvara Krishna Ar Sabhabritya. This is a line from one verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There's one Ishvara, Ekale Ishvara Ar Sabhabritya, and all others, even all the other expansions of that one Krishna or Vishnu, are taking their pleasure, are servants, and they're taking great pleasure in doing that. So much so that Krishna is seeing that, oh, my servants, Radharani, is getting more pleasure than me by serving me. So let me come in that form. So it's very interesting that, and I think I pointed this out once before, that this Ananda, he's responsible for the creation, and as Mahavishnu, he's of course glancing on all the universes and still when he glances, that's when things start to happen. That's when the three modes of nature start to manifest and do something in the universe. Otherwise, you've got all of these energies: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. They're just dormant. They're undifferentiated. They're like raw material. They're like all the ingredients in the kitchen before the cook goes in. You know, nothing's happening. But in the form of that glance, he activates everything. He injects the living entities, and he activates all those elements. And by the expansion, as Garbhodaksha Vishnu, he also manifests Lord Brahma on the lotus on the navel, and he's the engineer. He's most intelligent. He's got 4 heads, which are the smallest amount. We're in the smallest universe here. There are many other Brahmins with many other heads in bigger universes. But the point is he's got to figure out how to populate the universe. When you read the second canto, you'll see that it's not such a smooth activity, right? He gives birth to some of these demons from his mind. They go after him. He casts aside that body, right? And he says, okay, now we try it again. He manifests the Kumaras. Well, they're very saintly, but they're so saintly that they don't want to grow up and get entangled in family life, so they refuse to become progenitors, or progenitors or those who give birth, which angers him. And then from between his eyebrows comes Lord Shiva, and so basically it's a difficult job, and but gradually he manifests the actual progenitors who are able to gradually populate the universe. So it's a very complex reality that we're hearing about here. And now, having heard of this, this is going down in Patala, which is down near the bottom of the universe, right? And now we're going to hear what's going down even further, what's going down, even down further. And that is the hellish planets. And this is just a sample. There's an unlimited variety of hellish planets. And it's interesting because when you see, well, what is it, why is it included? Why is it included? Because those of us who know a little about Christian religion, that there's an aspect of it, the fire and brimstone, right? To try to get you serious about coming to church, otherwise you'll suffer from your sins and go to hell, right? But so that's a reality. That's true, and that, of course, nowadays people are giving up going to church. They don't believe it, or there's too much corruption in the church, whatever the reasons are. But it's a reality that if we don't know anything and we just act according to our senses on the animal platform, we're going to commit so many sins in the human form and suffer like anything. When you read these hell, I remember when I told you already, I worked on this chapter. I was the first one to read it, after Prabhupada translated it. It's funny, because in the room that I was working on, I didn't put it up there, but someone had put up a painting. You'll find it in the fifth canto. You open up the volume, you see there's some paintings of hell, hellish punishments. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's worthwhile seeing it. Right in the volume that I don't have here, but it's right there. And they had put those on the wall, I think one or two of them. Because, devotees don't really want to have that on their wall in their living room, So they put it up there, and I thought, well, this is quite appropriate to remind me, because it's quite startling. So let's reflect a little bit about the didactic value of that, which is the teaching value, of how to inspire the urgency of someone to take up genuine yoga, bhakti yoga. That's the whole idea of the Bhagavatam and everything. And that is this idea that we hear it all the time in Prabhupada's talks. So much of his speaking is trying to convince people first that there's life after death. That's the basic principle, right? Dehi nosmin yada dehi komadam yopanam. And if one comes to that point, then everything opens up. Is that okay? So what are your plans for the next life? I don't know. I didn't know that I could make plans. So then the whole explanation of how your acts, your karma, your work, as Prabhupada would call it, determines what your destiny is in the next life. If you're violating the laws of God, even if you don't know them, it still doesn't count. Just like in civil society, it says, Prabhupada always used the example of driving on the road. Oh, I didn't know. I'm from Australia. That's why I drove on the left side and I had this accident. So please forgive me. Let me go. No, you have a responsibility to know the laws of where you're living, so that you don't violate them. In other words, ignorance is no excuse, right? So much of our Shastra is in giving us the laws. This is what the laws of God are. And if you don't follow them, you suffer. And how do we know? Just look around. Nobody knows. Everyone is fraught with ignorance. And so they're committing all kinds of sins and not knowing it. They don't even know it. Just go to the grocery store and buy your chopped meat, and make a hamburger. I do it all the time. I live across from McDonald's. Yeah. People down there, they're driving through there lunchtime. There's a whole drive away. I order this, order that. No one thinks twice about it. But still, they're making their future very dark. So much pain. So the devotees, carrying the knowledge that's been given to us in the form of Prabhupada's books and so many ways, are trying to save people from suffering. As we are confident we've been saved. Sure, we may not go back to Godhead, this lifetime, but we're going to get a human birth. And if we do some devotional service, we'll get a birth where we can take up devotional service again. But the most important thing is that we see the urgency in our own lives. And what will impel us? Well, when you start Krishna consciousness, of course, Lord Chaitanya's movement is so ecstatic. Susukam kartam abhyam. Krishna describes at the beginning of the 9th chapter. The king of knowledge, Rajabidya, Rajaguyam, very confidential. Rajabidya, Pabitam idamuttamam, the most purifying process is Bhakti Yoga. And Pratyakshavagam dharmyam, this is very important, that even from day one, you can directly experience some of the benefits. I remember when I started Hatha Yoga. I used to do that Hatha Yoga. I had no idea there was any other kind of yoga. That was yoga. So it was becoming popular in the early 70s when I started. So I started, and there was also a good result. But I mean, the first thing is that, I stretch this way, I stretch that way. It's, it's a little painful. But I had confidence, that it was going to be beneficial. And after, a few sessions, I loosened up, and I felt the benefit tremendously. So that's also there, in some of the yogas, like in the 6th chapter, it just seems like impossible. Go off alone and practice pranayama and do all these things and be fearless. I highly recommend, by the way, I don't think anyone was here, maybe Balaram, you remember, used to have a Prabhupada lecture once a week. I don't know if we're going to go back to that because we have more speakers now. But to cultivate hearing Prabhupada's lectures, they're fully available, they're free, And of course they have a quality that's inimitable because it's pure devotee speaking, But so much of his preaching was trying to convince people of the basic points, especially when he would speak to a Sunday feast or outsiders, is that the radical statements. No one can be happy in this material world. And people, we have one gentleman who comes, I'm not going to name his name, who insists, well, there's some happiness, And I'm trying to keep him convinced, that happiness is your worst enemy. Because that's Maya's way of trying to convince you that you can be here and stay here and be happy. But the fact is that this material world, Krishna certified it as a place of unhappiness. Who knows the verse, that one line? Balaram knows. Dukkaliyam shashvatam. Thank you. Now think about that one phrase, how rich that is. It's a Dukkalaya means it's an abode of suffering. And how many times, does anyone here not know what the threefold miseries are? Birth, death, old age, and disease? Okay. So those are constantly, we're constantly suffering from them, or we're being threatened to suffer by them. Just like, this whole thing with climate change. Well, we've been pretty fortunate here. We haven't had 105-degree weather, But still, most of us know that the Colorado River is drying up. The reservoirs are all drying up from all the heat, right? And that could pose a big problem. So far, our showers are still working. We still have drinking water, But we're not supposed to do so much watering. I don't know if they're going to come and get us here. We're doing a lot of watering. It's his fault. No, it's for Krishna and Krishna providing. But the point is, that's a threat. It's a form of anxiety. And then there's the war, and there's pollution, there's Omicron, and there's just the rising inflation. People can't afford to pay their mortgage or pay their rent. This is all a source of great anxiety. So there's no question that this place is full of difficulties and things that can cause you misery. But Srila Prabhupada came to teach us through the Shastra. Yes, and that you've been through this a million times before, in different births, different species. In every species, you had hope for happiness. Some of the rudimentary species. Well, all right, there's my she-hog, and here's my little hoglets. I got it together, and I got responsibility. But eventually, nowadays, you go to the slaughterhouse, or you just die, or you just get old, and there's always something. Gradually the adhyatmic miseries happen, and then there's the other two. So, okay, it doesn't take too much imagination or understanding that you certainly are not always in bliss, right? Although you'd like to be, right? The Bhagavatam teaches that. Is that in the 11th canto? Is that the idea is to maximize the happiness and minimize the unhappiness. But one should understand, human intelligence, that it's impossible, that ultimately the misery takes over. If nothing else, just time, and the body will give out, and somebody will eat you, and somebody. That's just the way it is. So then the next question is, and this is where faith comes in. You don't have to have much faith that this world is a suffering. That you can experience on your own, if you just call your attention to it. But the fact that it's going on life after life, and that this is the real mission of human life, is to get out of this prison house, where we're being punished, and to go back to Godhead, where there's no suffering, there's no time, there's no death, and like that. Now that's a big leap of faith people have, and Prabhupada, in his person himself, in his own demeanor and his and what he gave. Okay, let's chant Hare Krishna. And if you chant Hare Krishna, you absorb your mind in it, you're actually getting it's just like a few drops of the Ganges water leaking through, the causal ocean water, and the Ganges water was so valuable. So you're getting a few drops of realization. It's opening up your heart. Oh, this is, suddenly I feel much more relaxed. I feel much more, I'm forgetting all my sufferings, Or where Prabhupada, and when Prabhupada started the movement, oh, this is a special kind of high, And Prabhupada said, yes, make a pamphlet, stay high forever. And they did. And it was effective. It got a lot of people coming to the storefront, and they were getting, and some of them gave up the drugs, and then they took the drug of Hare Krishna. And so that instilling of faith is so important. Srila Prabhupada says in one tape that the Bhagavad Gita is meant to give us faith in Krishna, in Krishna's existence, and in the whole philosophy. That's why it's so important. It's so concise, explained by a pure devotee, full of knowledge. And if we actually try to put some of the process into practice, then it'll make more and more sense to us. Everything that's in the Bhagavad Gita. For instance, Daivi Esha Gunamahi Mama Maya Duratya Mame Vyepa Padyante Maya Metang Tarantite. Who can explain what that would? You know the verse. Daivi Esha Gunamahi. Yes, cross beyond it. This material energy of mine is divine. Daivi Esha, composed of the modes of nature. Why is it divine? Because it's my energy, and I'm divine. Krishna speaking. So he says Duratya, which is really an understatement. It means difficult to overcome. It means impossible to overcome. But really, because I've been wrestling with this. I've been trying to, because in the synonym, Prabhupada is very difficult. So I'm thinking, can we at least put the very in there in the translation? And why is it it's very difficult? That implies that it's possible with great effort, right? If you say, it's difficult to get into Harvard. Well, okay, but it's feasible, but it's really not feasible to cross over. So I was thinking of this one verse, because there's a verse in the prayers of the personified Vedas that's often quoted. That those others, besides your devotees, this is the demigods praying to Krishna in the womb. Prabhupada will quote this verse all the time. And that is that they think themselves liberated. These are the impersonalists, not the Mayavadis so much, who are more modern. This is the demigod speaking, after all, back in 5,000 years ago. But those who are simply tapasvis, and their goal is to merge into Brahman. Brahmavadis, the four Kumaras were like that at first. They preferred the Brahman. So a few of them can, by aruha kritrena. Kritrena is an onomatopoeia. You know what an onomatopoeia is? A word that means like what it sounds. English is full of them. Jingle and tinkle and splash and boo. Yeah. So what does kritrena sound like? Great effort, difficulty. That's what it means. They can rise up to Brahman. The impersonalists can do that. But they fall down again. So they've crossed over, but they can't stay over. In other words, cross over means rise up. They've crossed over. They're no longer suffering the threefold miseries. They're in Brahman. But because it's unnatural for the soul, that's not the spiritual world. They get restless. They want to do something. Oh, let's go down and make some hospitals or something. So they cross, but then they come back because they find being over in that regard boring. So really, so that makes so therefore Krishna is completely accurate. Duratyaya, it's difficult to cross over, but those who surrender unto me can easily cross beyond it. So for the time, someone walks in off the street and he comes and he's in a kirtan, and if you really concentrate and you get you're absorbed in the sound, which is not that hard, at least for a few minutes to do, then you for that time you're not feeling the impingement of the material energy. You can feel as if you transcend it if you get out of it, and that's pratyaksham, pratyakshavagamam dhamyam, and susukam. Dancing, chanting, feasting, Prabhupada always points. It's just, it says on one tape, these yoga system tapes. This is all on the sixth chapter. Most of the tapes are spoken in L.A., right after they moved into the big temple. This is Prabhupada's on fire, all of the lectures, all of the tapes are really very, very good. I highly recommend them. This is like 1970, yeah. So he's explaining that the process of Ashtanga Yoga is very difficult, but the principle is the same: to absorb the mind in Krishna, as he says in text 20 and 21. Prabhupada quoted all the time. He would say that yang labva chapadam labam munyande nadikam tata. Having attained this realization of the Lord in the heart, which is meditating, one will think there's no greater gain than this. One will enjoy transcendental bliss and with transcendental senses, not spiritual happiness, and all your miseries will be gone. And this is the benefits of Krishna consciousness, and he explains it that way in the purport and in the lecture. But that's not our process. That's not practical in this age. And it's not necessary. Especially it's not necessary. That we can achieve the same state by strictly following the process as outlined by Srila Prabhupada in his books, especially Nectar of Devotion, been given to us. That to rise up out of this material consciousness, the material world, and to experience the highest happiness that can be, which is ever expanding, ever increasing, and never ending. There's nothing greater than that. And the miseries are reduced down to nil. It sounds like Pollyanna. It sounds like a dream. But Srila Prabhupada personified that, and those who take seriously the process can begin to experience that state. And certain highs, like I'm watching these wonderful Following Srila Prabhupada videos, on YouTube. They're all on YouTube. Wonderful. And there's some of these ecstatic kirtans. Prabhupada, he's installing the deities in the Bhaktivedanta manor after a great struggle, to get his place in London. The six heroic householders, they went there, the famous, and for, a year? They struggled here and there. They didn't even have a place, Finally, they met George Harrison and everything started to open up. Anyway, so even the burial place was too small. It didn't feel like it was the permanent place. But when they got the manor, George Harrison gave them the manor, and they installed those deities there. It's not Radha Ishwar, but the other ones, Radha Gokulananda. The video of it, and Prabhupada is that all devotees are. And then he starts circumambulating, and there's this wonderful video, Prabhupada dancing in front of the deities. Now, those the devotees who were there, and the way they describe it, is that everyone was just in ecstasy. You can believe it. They're completely, transcendental to the material modes and the material miseries. So that is now. How do we get from Ananta to that? Well, Ananta Shesha is also Nityananda, Nityananda, eternally blissful. He is the manifestation of Balaram, who's still serving Krishna as Lord Chaitanya. He says, "I'm just a servant of Lord Chaitanya," and he proved it. He went to Jagannath Puri with Lord Chaitanya. Famously broke the danda. And then he was there, and he just wanted to stay there. But Lord Chaitanya said, "No, you have to go back to Bengal and preach. I can't go. My mother told me to stay here. I can't go back there." So he's setting up that. So Lord Nityananda reluctantly went. And I'm telling you, that chapter in the Chaitanya Bhagavatam is so amazing, of his traveling from Puri to Bengal, where he would then, meet Raghunath Das and have the Panihati festival and all of the things that, are there in the CC. But the trip there, the most amazing thing, I feel this is okay because this is still Ananta in the form of Lord Nityananda. So he's traveling, and he's got his 12 Gopals. There is, his intimate associates. They were with him from Navadvip and everything. But then he has also many others who are traveling with him. And so they're just doing kirtan. They're going to Bengal, but they're not worrying about the roads or the map or anything like that. They're just doing kirtan constantly. And they get way off. And so I finally asked him, "Well, how do I get back to Mayapur?" And "Oh, you're way off the track. You go way back here, 20 miles back here." And then so they're going here and there. So along the way, they stop. They stop for like a month in one place. And then kirtan. And the whole village, all the villages getting into it. And everyone was empowered. It describes how people were uprooting trees. Little children were uprooting trees. Nobody was sleeping. They were just chanting. And the chapter, like 600 verses long. You don't see anything like that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Although it get something like 300-400 max. So anyway, and this is our worshipable Lord Nityananda, who is the personified guru, who is the personification of mercy, who saved Jagai and Madai, and we're all Jagais and Madais. So our service to Lord Krishna is actually a service, is also service to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is encouraged and mediated, if you will, by Lord Nityananda. If you want to get the mercy of, if you want to understand Radha Krishna, you have to get mercy of Lord Chaitanya. To get the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, you get the mercy of Lord Nityananda. And if you want to get the mercy of Lord Nityananda, you got to approach the Jagais and Madais, who we were, and try to give them what you got. Still are in many cases. So that's my little meditation on Lord Ananta. And now knowing what's coming in the next chapter, because we're almost through with this chapter. There's a few more verses. But isn't this verse nice? I think this is one of the ones that Narada Muni composed. These verses have this special beat. I'm not sure if there's any verses in this Bhagavatam that have it. But, beautiful verses about Lord Ananta. We can meditate on them. And so much, he gets angry and burns up the universe, but really, he's and then engaging in those wonderful pastimes with all of his servants there and describing that, and they're feeling very much attraction to him. And then by glorifying him, one goes back to Godhead. So that means by glorifying the Panchatattva and Hare Krishna, Lord Chaitanya is a member of the Panchatattva. So it's all consistent ultimately. But sometimes, I mean, sometimes I think, okay, here's the chapter on the hell's coming up, you know, and it's pretty jarring, you know. But if you just chant the Sanskrit verses or even read the prose, it takes maybe 15 minutes, to maybe 20 minutes to read all through that, you know. I mean, or just to read the English translation, it would take you a little bit longer. But we're going to spend a month on it because we read one verse at a time. So and yeah, there are quite a lot of purpose. Yeah. And so it's going to be, you know, austerity. It should be bracing. And at the end of the thing, we should all be chanting, really, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna. I don't want to go there. The end of the chapter.
At the end, or
right? Yeah, after 2 verses, after each day. Yeah. But really, you know, we don't want to just be on chanting in order to escape this material world. Lord Chaitanya, he taught us Nadanang Nandanang Sundari. But we should chant seriously. In other words, what we read, what we experience, we should be chanting very sincerely and with great concentration, praying that we can, you know, experience the highest ecstasy of Krishna consciousness, and that we can be inspired and empowered to help others to take it up. So I'll end there. If anyone has any comments or questions. Bhakti Bob, you're on.
Hare Krishna. Wonderful discourse, Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, all glory to Prabhupada.
I have 2 questions, but one's a little intimate, so I'll save it. Maybe we can discuss it.
Okay.
I'm interpreting that the Lord Brahma is subordinate to Ananda Dev.
Definitely.
Okay. And so I just had one other comment. You know, when I come up the alley towards your place, I always get this feeling that I hope you don't see me walking past the McDonald's out your window.
Well, if I see you walking in there, then that'll be a problem.
Yeah, no, you won't. That's not going to happen.
I've walked past there quite a bit myself.
That's not going to happen. Okay. And that's all.
Oh.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate your classes. Also, when you talk about editing, you know, back in the day and what it was like in the beginning, those are such vivid pictures. I had just a small question about what you mentioned about editing in that room, and then my actual question for the day. So it might be semantics, but okay. You said you're editing this chapter on the hellish planets that you had just gotten fresh from Prabhupada's translations?
Well, yeah. I mean, there was a transcription. He would dictate it, and then they would transcribe it.
So that would imply that that canto isn't yet widely available. That devotees aren't really reading it because you're editing it.
No. I was editing it. I edited it, you know, 45 years ago.
Yeah, but at that time, was the 5th canto available for devotees to be reading?
No, it wasn't available till it was printed.
So how is there paintings of the hellish planets from the 5th canto on the wall? Because it seems like they'd be kind of secretive.
Well, 1 minute lesson on how the books are produced.
Yeah.
So you got the artists. You know, we had a whole team of artists, and they had the most difficult job because they didn't have time. They didn't have the kind of time they had in other cantos to paint. You know, it was all a very rushed job. So, but it was understood for the books to be printed with the paintings that they had to be the first ones to get copies of the original transcript. You could understand what's going on. You know, I was doing touch up, as it were. So they had that, and by the time I got the manuscript, there was some of them were already done, these paintings, and so I mean, this is, you know, it was a miraculous production. It couldn't even be conceived in the outside world of how quickly those, because it was like actually 15 volumes of the CC were produced, and 2 volumes of the 5th canto in a matter of 2 months. I mean, that's unheard of. You know the whole pastime. I mean, when the whole point of consolidating the BBT there in LA was to speed up the production, because it had been split up. In New York was the production, and in LA was the warehouse and the distribution. There was a huge truck, a huge semi, that was filled up with books, and one devotee would drive that truck around the country and drop books off for everybody. Yeah. And that was that. So that all of that was going on in L.A., organizing that, and so on the East Coast in New York was the production, but there was various problems with it, and it slowed down way. It took us all 1 year, 74, to produce the 4th canto, which is ridiculous. That was at that time I think it was 4 volumes, but that's Prabhupada was very upset with that, and so Ramaswamy Maharaj, he convinced Prabhupada, well, if we consolidated here in L.A., everything would go much faster. So that had been done, and then there was a morning walk, and Prabhupada, was walking, and Ramaswamy was there, and he was explaining how, well, now Prabhupada, instead of like a whole year to produce 4 volumes, we can produce 2 volumes every month, which was quite good, comparatively. Prabhupada stopped the walk, put his cane down in the sand. He was on the beach, in Venice Beach. He would walk there a lot. And said, you have to produce all the volumes in 2 months, all 17 volumes. And Ramaswamy said, Prabhupada, that's impossible. And then came this immortal rejoinder from Prabhupada, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. Because what Prabhupada had done to start the movement and grow it, that was impossible. That's what people were saying about it. So then what to do? Well, Ramaswamy and Radhaballabha, he was the main hands-on manager of the press. They kind of then the work resumed, and they kind of laid back and were talking animatedly between us. Well, how can we do it? How can we do it? How can we? So even on that walk, he's saying, "Well, Prabhupada, we figured out how we can do it." But it requires this, this, and this. We have to be able to fly in anybody who can do an index. We have to be able to contact you for consultation at all times, and various other things. And Prabhupada said, of course, everything he gave it. And so the marathon was on, And I wasn't part of it right away, because I took over for Jayavarta Swami. He was the editor of the BTG, but he had to do full-time with that editing, and the other editor was Hayagriva. And he was there, and they were both in L.A., and that was the really hard part, the English and the Bengali editing. That and the painting was awesome. That was all difficult. So anyway, I'm going along, working on BTG the first month. But then, for various reasons, Hayagriva had to drop out, and so they needed another editor. So they had so many people who had been flown in for indexing and everything, who could do editing, with a little training, that they had a little contest. And that was edit the first chapter about Priyavrata, the 5th canto, or a few verses of it. So I had been editing Prabhupada because I've been editing his lectures, for over a year. So I had a little head start. And anyway, I won that contest. So I was given the, so there I'm sitting there. The 5th canto was one thing. Imagine the contrast. I'm editing the hellish, chapter thing. And then I go to the CC, and I'm in the Antya Leela, where Lord Chaitanya is experiencing the highest ecstasy. He's falling into the sea and all of these different things. And I was thinking, my God, I'm only 2 years in the movement. What did I do to deserve this? This is the greatest service you can imagine. So that's a very fond memory. But that's why the paintings were there, because they were doing the paintings while the editing was being done, or before the editing was even done. Hare Krishna. Anything else?
I had one, actually.
Oh, go ahead.
And this is going to come down to terms, but I think you'll get the idea of what I'm trying to say. It's just trying to... My mind was blown when it was Balaram that we showed was expanding into the Vishnus in service of Krishna, right? And that, because I always thought, Vishnu, Krishna, I get it. I get why Balaram's doing that. So it's expansion. So I guess these are the kind of the ideas. Does Krishna actually expand himself into anyone? Because what's Balaram and Krishna's relationship to Krishna? Are they non-different? And if so, then Krishna has like a tortoise and a boar. Are those non-different than Krishna, or are those because he doesn't expand anything? Running Krishna do, right?
Well, you have the different kinds of expansions. We're also expansions, but we're energy. We're Krishna's energy, whereas Balaram is not Krishna's energy. He's this word plenary Prabhupada uses all the time. Plenary expansion means a fully empowered expansion. So Balaram has the same qualities as Krishna does, but it's slightly. What's the difference? Prabhupada said the complexion. There's very little difference. But Balaram does things that Krishna doesn't do personally, because he he expands as the Purusha avatars, and and so he's kind of responsible for management and everything. But his expansions are manifest. So he also has, as we've read, we had his appearance today. He has his own lila in the spiritual world. But it's kind of a technical thing of what kind of Krishna expands in different ways. Sometimes they're all the same, the expansions, or sometimes unlike any other, because the yogis can expand too, but they're always 8, but they're always the same. And so these plenary expansions, like Krishna in Dwarka, is a little different than Krishna in Vrindavan. The original Krishna. With his, with the gopis and the cowherd boys and all that. That's the original Krishna, and then he expands to of a slightly different aspect in Dwarka, where he's domesticated. He has all the queens, and he's a father, and he shows that aspect. So it gets quite complicated. A lot. There's sections of the CC I can point out where it's explained, and you can understand that. But there's different technical terms. The Leela avatars, you mentioned Matsya, and they're also, it's like mind-boggling. They're also Krishna, but they only manifest a certain aspect of his glory. Like Lord Nrsingadev is also Krishna, he's not different. But he doesn't manifest, he manifests the power of Krishna, there's no question about that. But not in the same degree as the beauty. The incredible beauty of Krishna with the flute and all that. And you won't see Nrsingadev playing the flute. It's Rasabhas. That's why I'm not saying you have to do this, but this is when we sing the Nrsinga prayers. I don't look at the altar, because you look at Radha and Krishna. You're thinking Tabakada Kamalabare Nakam. You see how it doesn't mix. So if we want, just close your eyes or look elsewhere. Look at you look at the parampara. Otherwise, it's Rasabhas.
I look at Nrsingadev. Okay.
You can look at the Nrsinga picture for sure. In Vrindavan, in New Vrindavan, not only in Vrindavan, but in New Vrindavan, they have a separate altar, just like in Mayapur. If you have, when and if you all get to Mayapur, I think some of you have been. You've been. You'll see they have the kirtan. You have the big altar for the Panchatattva. And then you have Radha Madhava with the 8 gopis, and everyone's singing and Hare Krishna, and the Samsara prayers you sing, And then that all ends, and then, then the curtains open for Nrsingadev. It's a whole separate altar. And there's that Nrsingadev that you see there, Ugra Nrsinga. It's a different mood. And you sing, Namaste Narasimhaya Praladana.
I understand expansion on a material perspective, like a crude analogy, like I eat paneer all festival weekend, and I expanded my waistline. Right? There was a time when it was smaller, now it's bigger. So creation and dissolution, as far as expansion purposes. But when we're talking about Balaram and Radharani, and we're talking about those Leela avatars, they're always eternally expanded, because expanding gives that idea of action occurs.
Yes. The English language fails. It's not. It's not. There's no point where Balaram is not expanded. He's always expanded. And Radharani, she's not the same. She's energy. Balaram's not energy. He's energetic, you see. But she's the supreme energy. There's a verse right at the beginning of CC, and we'll end here because it's getting late. Radha, Krishna Praniya Vikruti Ladani Shakti Rasman. This is like the 4th or 5th verse in. And what it actually means is Radharani is a transformation of love for Krishna, personified. Radha Krishna Praniya Vikruti. Krishna Praniya means love for Krishna. And she's personified love for Krishna. Known as Ladani Shakti. Ladani, pleasure energy. We know that just like Prahlad, right? Prahlad, he gives pleasure to Krishna, Lord Nrsingadev. So that it's very nicely explained in the 4th chapter of Adi Leela. You can read that and you'll see that. The ontological position of Srimati Radharani and all the other gopis, they're all expanded from her. The queens are all expanded from her. Even Durga is expanded from her. They're all Shakti. Yes, she is Shakti and they're all Shakti. So we're coming up on Radhashtami, so it'd be nice if everyone read that chapter. Okay, we better end. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Uh-oh. I didn't ask for any Zoom questions. Too late anyway.
No question.